From LPM,
Louisville Public Media.
Support comes from Vision Zero. On foot or behind the wheel, safety is a shared responsibility. And Vision Zero Louisville believes 0 roadway fatalities is the only acceptable amount. Their mission is to create safe roads by design, engineering solutions, and education. More information at visionzerolouisville.org.
Welcome to On Track. I'm Aisha Jaffer. It's that time of year again. The air's getting warmer, flowers are blooming, and soon it's about to get a whole lot louder. That's right, cicadas are coming, and in Kentucky this year we're expecting an extra noisy season. For some, it's a natural wonder. For others, it's, an invasion of tiny buzzing creatures. What makes cicadas so special? Why are they so loud? And why is 2025 an even bigger deal here in Kentucky? Today, we're joined by an expert who can help us make sense of this buzzing topic. Dr. Ric Bessin is an extension entomologist and professor at the University of Kentucky. He spent decades working with insects across the state and helping farmers, gardeners, and even kids better understand the bugs around them. Dr. Bessin, thanks for being here on Track.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So we're going to start with the basics. What exactly are cicadas?
Okay. Cicadas they're insects. They're small insects. They spend most of their life underground, but every once in a while they have a big emergence. And so what we're going to experience this year is called the periodical cicada. And it gets that name just because we don't see it very often. This is the 17-year periodical cicada. So this group has been underground for 16 and a half years.
That's so wild to think about. And I have some deeper questions because they call these broods, and I want to get into that in a little bit. But I'm just kind of curious, once these cicadas emerge, how many theoretically are we expecting this year?
Well, the group that is coming out this year, we actually number them by Roman numerals. It's Brood 14, and it's the second largest brood of all the broods that comes out in the United States. And we're expecting on a U.S. level, literally trillions of cicadas coming out. More than people can really wrap their mind around.
So if I was thinking about metrics in Kentucky, you would just think a ton, right? Tons. So a brood, what exactly is a brood? How do you define that?
Well, about 130 years ago, they started numbering the broods based on the years they came out. And so the 17-year broods, there were 17 of them. And so they numbered them 1 through 17 in order for those years. And there was 13 of the 13-year broods. And so they numbered those 18 through 30. And so there's officially 30 broods, but some of them have disappeared.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that some of them are, it's surprising to think about when there's trillions, but that they're reducing in size. Now, just really quick, though, just to make sure I define this, a brood is kind of like the collection, the periodicals that come out all together in time. And this is Brood 14, and they're on a 17-year cycle, this one.
Correct. So the last time we saw this brood was 2008. The next time we're going to see them is going to be 2042.
Wow. So they're growing with us, or we hope. Well, we're going to get into that a little bit more. I kind of want to ask, though, I think because there's so many coming, where in Louisville or in the Kentuckiana area are we going to start seeing these cicadas?
Well, we say that they're going to come out everywhere in Kentucky except the western third of the state. So the central part and the eastern part, they're going to be pretty widespread. But that doesn't mean that they come out everywhere in every county. There's going to be pockets within counties where people see that there have been established woods, wood lots and rivers and along rivers and creeks and things like that, where you have those established woods. That's where you're more likely to see them.
So somewhere like Cherokee Park might get really loud. But I've heard sometimes, like in neighborhoods near me, like Shelby Park, you might not hear anything. But I don't know. This brood sounds pretty big, so it might be a wonderful symphony.
It is. I think it's really cool. I mean, but I'm biased. I'm an entomologist, and so I know the greater population doesn't share my interests.
Well, they might. I am fascinated by this. In fact, I'm kind of curious because there's something interesting within this question. I'm just first curious. I know we're talking these are periodical cicadas, but what kind of species of cicadas are actually here in Kentucky that we can expect?
Well, we talk about like Brood 14 as being, one group of cicadas. There's actually 3 different species within that group, and they're hard to tell apart. They look very similar, but it's a complex of species that are all coming out together. We also have another cicada that comes out every year. And that's called the Dog Day cicada, but it doesn't come out at the same time. This group is going to be out during May and the early part of June. The Dog Day cicada comes out in July and August, so it's much more into the dog days of summer.
So they don't come out periodically; they just come out every year.
The Dog Day cicada, a few of them come out every year, even though it takes a few years for any individual to develop and complete its life cycle. We always get a few every year.
So in this, I heard that there's like this rare blue-eyed cicada as well. Did those appear here?
Yeah, and they are truly rare because normally the periodical cicada has a black body, some orangish red veins on the wings, and these really scarlet red eyes. That's the normal cicada. 99.9999% are going to look like that. But every once in a while, you see one that has light blue eyes. And so that's that rare individual that comes out. And I think it's, if you want to take your kids out looking at cicadas, see if they can find a blue-eyed cicada out there. They are truly rare.
Have you seen one?
Yes.
And what causes that variation?
Genetics.
Yeah.
It's just a rare recessive gene, and everything has to align correctly for them to show up.
That sounds like a fun game, though. Find the cicada.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a lot of really cool things parents can do with their kids with this emergence. And I think one of the cool things would be to go out at night when they first emerge with a flashlight and show the kids how they're crawling out of their shells, and they pump up their wings and that they harden and develop, and it's really cool to see that process.
Yeah, because we'll talk about that a little more. So they come out, and then they find themselves a place on the tree to molt off their shell, essentially.
Yeah. So what they do is right at the end of their cycle underground, they go close to the surface. When the soil temperatures hit about 64 degrees and we get some rains to soften the soil, they make these mud chimneys. They're about 2 to 4 inches in height. And then they come out of those chimneys and they crawl up any vertical surface. And that's what they're going to shed their skids on.
So kind of like a butterfly in a way.
Yeah.
Or a snake, I guess maybe is better analogy. Is it only the periodical ones that do that, or the Dog Day one as well?
The Dog Day ones do it just the same way, but there's just not as many of them.
Okay. Yeah, not in the trillions.
Yeah.
So with the periodicals, too, if they're underground for 13 or 17 years, what's the significance of that timing? Is there some sort of rhyme or reason for that specific timing for them?
Well, it's weird. And people have thought about this a lot because, 13 or 17 years, those are prime numbers. They're large prime numbers. And the idea is it's very difficult for another species to synchronize when their populations are large in number to exploit the periodical cicada. We don't have bird or, squirrel populations that peak every 13 or 17 years. And so what it allows the cicadas to do is overwhelm all the predators. There's just so many of them that nothing can eat them all. They're going to mate, lay eggs, and reproduce, and their populations will continue just by overwhelming everything in the environment.
So it's like a survival tactic to kind of come out that way, which also begs the question, okay, 13, 17 years, a lot of insects I know don't live very long. So they must live, like, what are their age What is their life expectancy, essentially?
Well, once they come out of the ground as an adult, it's going to be about 4-5 weeks per individual. Now, they all don't come out the same day.
Right.
You know, they're going to come out over 2-3 weeks. And so you're going to see cicadas for 4 to 6 weeks in an area. And then they die and the adults are gone.
But is that after living like 17 years? Or
Yes.
Yeah, wow.
So the females are going to lay their eggs in branches. The eggs hatch after about 7-8 weeks. The nymphs drop to the ground. They crawl onto a root, and then they start feeding on the sap in roots of these trees. And after about a year, they molt. After about another 2 years after that, they molt again, and they're going to molt 4 times underground. But it's going to take them 16 and a half years of feeding on those tree roots till they become a full-size nymph and are ready to come out of the ground.
So underground for these 13 or 17 years, they're mostly just feeding, living their lives. Because I'm just like, what are you doing for all that time?
They are literally just tapped into the root system of trees and taking a little bit of sap from the roots.
So coming out, these emergencies, these broods are mostly about mating. Is that right?
Yes. Well, I mean, it's with all animals, mating's very important. I mean, that's what continues that cycle of life for them. And so they come out of the ground after a few days, they mate. After about another week or so, they're going to begin laying eggs. Very, very exciting. And we're going to talk about the sound soon enough, but I'm kind of curious for you. What was it for you that got you interested in bugs, cicadas specifically? Was there any sort of like moment experience or something like that sparked your interest in studying this? Well, what got my interest in entomology was keeping bees.
Okay.
And so I started keeping bees when I was 12 and have been keeping bees since. And so that spurred my interest in entomology. And then when I moved to Kentucky in 1991 is when we had a big emergence of Brood 14 of the cicada. So I got to see the grandparents of the ones that are coming out this year.
Oh my goodness. What was that experience like for you to see your first emergence?
It's, when you get into a pocket where they're really thick, I mean, it's a very special experience. It's one of those things in nature that you don't see very often. And it was, I think it was really cool, to hear the whining, to see the cicadas just covering the branches, and yeah, cool.
Well, and I think it's kind of a great like community experience, it sounds like, because like you said, you have some ideas, right, of ways that parents and kids can kind of like experience this, like with the flashlight, finding the blue one. But is there any other things you think that to make a game or make fun of, like not make fun, but make fun out of this experience for educational purposes of cicadas?
Well, what one thing is, just to look at a cicada and it's like, having the kids try and figure out how they're making that noise.
Yes.
They don't have any apparatus that they can pick up to make the noise, but yeah, they have these little tympanums. They're like drums that they flex them in and out on the sides of their abdomen to make that noise. And so just having the parents, look at them carefully, look at their mouth parts, and because they don't fly around and they're not going to jump at people. They don't bite, they don't sting. So they're really cool things to study.
And what is the purpose of the sound that they make?
For them to gather and, courtship and all that. So they get up in the tops of the trees, and during the heat of the day, they're making that sound and trying to bring others together. And they're social.
So it's kind of like saying, hey, come over here. Like, hey, Bob, come over here. And then, but also is it a mating sound too? Like, hey, I have the best song as well?
I don't know that it goes that far, but I think it's definitely to gather the cicadas together.
And I've heard that their sound kind of dampens at night. Do we know why that happens? They're letting us sleep? Is that?
Well, that is nice. But the songs tend to be during the day, which is good. At night, they're not going to be as active. They're not going to be flying around. Yeah. And I have to say that, I think they're cool and all that, but I do also hear from people that live in areas where they get the constant whining sound all the time. And I do understand it becomes a headache.
Yeah, unless you love the sound. Maybe there's something creative that can be done that way.
But it's only for a few weeks.
Right. So they're coming out in April, May? No, May, you said, right?
Right.
For the periodicals.
Yeah, beginning of cicada. We're seeing them emerge now.
Okay. And then they go back in June, right?
They're going to lay their eggs in the branches. At the end of June, we're going to get the adult die-off. And it's really in July that we tend to see the eggs start hatching.
Okay.
And these little nymphs, little tiny nymphs, a fifth the length of a grain of rice, are going to drop to the ground, and they're going to tunnel down into the roots and keep that cycle going.
So from what I understand, at that point, you don't want to be hanging out under trees, at least through July.
Well, there are some other things that are going on. The females, they lay their eggs in the branches. So they have an egg layer, we call it an ovipositor, and they really rip into little limbs the size of a pencil.
Okay.
And some of those limbs are going to break off. Some of them break in the wind and fall to the ground. Others break halfway and hang from the trees. And so one of the things we're going to see midsummer is that a lot of our bigger trees have these broken limbs that are hanging up there. And when I mean limbs, it's going to be the last 18 inches. It's not heavy limbs, but really tiny limbs that are broken off in the trees. It's going to look ugly this year, but it really doesn't hurt the trees, not big trees.
Well, we'll be back with more after the break. You're on track with Louisville Public Media. Welcome back to On Track. I'm Aisha Jaffer, and we're talking about the loud, buzzing, fascinating world of cicadas with Dr. Ric Bessin, extension entomologist and professor at the University of Kentucky. So you've kind of alluded to this. The cicadas, their shells essentially don't hurt the trees. Should we be worried about cicadas as humans, or are they harmful to pets or anything like that?
So cicadas are eaten by pets. If you have a dog that spends time outside, your dog's invariably going to eat one, probably like it, and eat another one. And, I look at some of the old literature, from the 1800s or so, and they used to talk about the wildlife that would really devour these cicadas, the hogs and other things in the woods. And, they would dig up the ground, when the nymphs get close to the ground and stuff. And the reports, for the most part, say that, they're not harmful, that they have lots of fats and other things. And, wildlife tends to engorge on it and fatten up a little bit with the cicadas, birds and other things. Although I have read some things where people say that dogs can at times overeat.
Oh my God. So they're tasty, it sounds like.
Yeah, and you know what happens when a dog overeats something.
Yeah, yes. As a dog owner, yes. So I'm going to assume, like, with these big emergences, it must bring in a lot of different predators, humans included, really, during that time.
Yeah, and when you look at indigenous societies, they have eaten cicadas in the past. I mean, that has been a part of the human diet. It's not sustainable in that you eat them for a few weeks and then they disappear for 13 or 17 years. And so it can't be your diet. It's just, part of your diet at one point. And people today still, there are some people that eat cicadas. The one warning I would have is people need to watch out for allergies. Anytime you try something new, particularly if you have shellfish allergies, I've heard.
Yes.
But so just if you're so adventurous, do so with caution.
Yeah, I've heard of a lot of people eating cicadas, but I guess it's a timely thing in a way. Have you ever tasted a cicada?
I haven't, but I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
And I was actually reading some stories, and there were some where they were suggesting certain ways to eat the cicadas as being better.
What have you heard? I'm curious now.
And this was from 1907.
Oh, wow.
But they were talking about batter frying.
Oh,
the cicadas.
Everything tastes amazing fried.
I don't think they were as health conscious back then. Well, they worked it off.
Yeah, I've heard about stir fries and shakes and all kinds of things people get into. Well, I'd be curious to hear what you think, and then maybe I'll jump into the fray too. You know what? I mean, I know there's probably other uses. Are there any other uses you can think of, whether it's like fertilizer or bait or something that cicadas are good for?
Well, when they come up by the trillions, they party in the trees.
Yeah.
And then they rain down after 4 to 6 weeks. Those bodies that are on the ground, are very high in nitrogen and other things, and they're going to decompose. And so they're going to help to provide some nutrients for those trees.
Oh, wow.
That are going to support them for the next few years.
So gardeners might be interested in that too, as fertilizer in a sense. And I guess as aerators, right? Because they're coming out of the ground. I am curious, with so many cicadas emerging at once, are there any environmental concerns we should be aware of? It sounds like they're more beneficial. But do you have any tips for gardeners or homeowners that are maybe worried and want to protect their trees and plants during this time?
Yes. And they can be damaging, particularly to new trees, because they break those little limbs. They weaken those little limbs. And on young trees, those are the little limbs that you want to be the nice, strong scaffold limbs in the future. So there's some things that we recommend. The one thing is these emergences are very, very predictable. I mean, we're using maps that go back hundreds of years.
Wow.
And knowing that we have an emergence coming up in a particular year, people may want to postpone when they plant new trees. It's like, well, I'm just not going to plant any new trees in 2025. I'm going to wait till 2026. And that's one way is just avoiding that. For homeowners that may have already planted a little tree and they're starting to see the cicadas coming out in their area, they may want to put some netting or something over that tree to just secure it around the base so the cicadas can't get in there. I've seen people do that. The only downside of that is when they take the netting off, all the limbs have been tucked in, and it looks like you're unwrapping a lollipop. It has that lollipop shape to it. But it is very effective, and it keeps them from having to use, insecticide and things like that in the garden.
Absolutely. Well, you talked about these maps for hundreds of years, which is so fascinating. Is there any tools for people who are just like maybe there's maps, apps, or other things now who want to track the emergence or track what's going on with cicadas in the area?
There's all sorts of websites where you can report cicada sightings, and they use that to update the maps. But if you get on the internet, Connecticut and some other universities are providing maps for all the broods, and they're collecting data.
That's so fascinating. I love that it's more real time that way. Then you can be like a citizen spotter, essentially.
Citizen science.
Yeah, I love that. Well, is there anything people in our community can do to better support the environment during cicada season, whether it's like protecting trees, avoiding pesticides like you mentioned, or just helping others understand cicadas' ecological role here?
Well, I think it's really important to simply appreciate these natural things that occur in nature. And a lot of times we're sort of separated, we're distant from things that may be going on in the environment. And it is important to recognize that insects have a significant role in providing services to the ecosystem that we rely on. And so educating kids about what's going on, I think is huge. And so just taking kids out, letting them enjoy that on the weekend and see what's going on, explain to them what's going on. And, after June, when they appear to disappear, they really haven't disappeared. They've just gone hidden, and they're going to stay hidden for the next 16 and a half years till 2042. And so, the kids that you show them the cicadas this year, think about how old they're going to be when they have an opportunity to see this brood again. They're going to be adults.
Yeah. That's fascinating. And I love that for you, the brood that's coming out now is the one that you first saw. So it has this like kind of significant, like historic, I don't know, piece, continuation, really.
I think it's really cool because, it's like I've seen the grandparents of these guys. I did research on the grandparents of these guys years ago. And then I saw them again in 2008 and 2025. And I don't know if I'll be around in 2042.
It's so fascinating to think about. Is it, well, for those maybe who are like, I don't know. I'm just curious. What is a common misconception about cicadas that you hear often?
Well, one that I hear quite a bit is they call them 17-year locusts.
Oh.
And it's like, well, no. They're not locusts. Locusts are grasshoppers.
Oh, okay.
And, when early settlers came to this continent, they saw this mass emergence and they related it to something they heard about, which was, the plagues of locusts.
Right.
And it's like, that's what they thought they were. And they're not closely related to grasshoppers at all. And, they're not locusts, they're cicadas.
I always thought about, like, because of the sound they make, they sound more like a cricket to me. I'm not sure if they're related, but...
Well, a cricket's closer to a grasshopper than it would be to a cicada.
See, yeah. I'm spreading compass. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Is there anything else fascinating you think we should know about cicadas that we don't know in the common public?
I think one thing to think about is that we do not have many opportunities to see cicadas. We've been focusing on Brood XIV, but the other big brood that we have is Brood X. And Brood X came out 4 years ago. And so that's the other big brood in this area. So it's really going to be quite a while before we see them again. So, for those people that are excited to see them, you need to take it in while you have a chance. For those people that are frustrated by them, well, it's going to be a while before you see them again. So,
well, Dr. Bessin, thank you so much for being here, and thanks for hanging out with us on Track.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Dr. Ric Bessin is an extension professor of entomology at the University of Kentucky. He coordinates the state's pesticide safety education and integrated pest management programs and serves as Kentucky's liaison to the IR4 project supporting pesticide registration for minor uses and minor acreage crops. And On Track is a production of Louisville Public Media. The On Track production team includes Michelle Tyreen Johnson, Alex Biscardi, and Laura Ellis. Our music is by Kojin Toshiro. If you're just tuning in and you want to hear the full show, you can find it now at LouisvilleOnTrack.org or in your favorite podcast app. And let's continue the conversation. Is there something you want to hear about? Something that matters to your Kentuckiana experience? Let us know by sending us a text or giving us a call at 502-814-TALK or send an email to ontrack@lpm.org. I'm Aisha Jaffer, and remember, when the cicadas sing, you know it's spring. Until next time, you're On Track with Louisville Public Media.